Okay, this is going to be our reference photo. We're going to use this very loosely, so I'm giving you lots of time to take a screenshot so that you have a copy of the reference photo as well. This was posted by Gabriella Claire Marino and on unsplash.com, which is where I get my reference photos if it's not my own picture. I'm going to put the video on pause, pop us in the tripod, and we can start making our sketch and talk about today's prompt. Okay, so this is the watercolor tutorial for July 2nd, July 2nd, what am I talking about? July 22nd. It's a watercolor tutorial for July 22nd, and the prompt is jacket. And so I thought what we would do is paint a city street scene, the sort of classic walking in the rain with umbrellas, silhouettes of people, kind of dark and moody and very atmospheric. And so the key with these paintings is simplification. You want to paint the least amount of kind of brush strokes and detail as you can, just to get the idea across, and then you have this painting that just feels very atmospheric is the best kind of word I think to describe that. And so that's what we're going to work on. We're going to use our reference photo very, very loosely just to give us an idea of the shapes and kind of color palette to pull from, but we're going to seriously simplify it. This has more people than we're going to paint. We're going to leave off of like all of the details of the buildings and that sort of thing. So we are going to start with a super simple sketch. You want to get out your pencil and your kneaded eraser for this part, and then after that we'll go into the painting. As always, if you do not want to make your own sketch, you are welcome. I'll leave time for you to take a screenshot of my sketch and you can transfer that to your paper. You're welcome to do that. I don't want anybody to say, well, I don't know how to draw, so I'm not going to do these tutorials. Like if you're just getting started with watercolor, you can add that drawing component in later. And so this is a very acceptable way to start practicing with watercolors. And that's part of keeping these beginner friendly. All right, I'm going to get my supplies and then we'll start our sketch. Okay, I'm going to move away my paint and let's get out the pencil. And what we're going to do is create there's like some really nice perspective here. So we've got kind of a horizon back here. So I'm going to create that. I'm going to bring it over a little more. And then we've got a building and it kind of comes down. There's like a little balcony. And we're not going to, like I said, we're just going to kind of paint these in, and then we'll kind of come like this. And then off in the distance, there's like another building that kind of sticks out. We've got a roof. Actually, it's a little lower than that. I'm going to change this up a bit. Actually, I'm not. You know what? We're not going to be that picky. Okay, so we've got like this. All right, so this is off in the distance. And there's kind of like and you can see some other buildings off in the distance here that kind of are coming in like this. I'm keeping this I want this really, really loose. There's like a kind of a triangle roof almost. Okay, and then this is where our buildings start for here, and they kind of work their way up like this, right? And so we're just come down. You see how I'm like, this is so not accurate. This is just an idea. We're just kind of like, okay, letting us see that we are on the street. This is we're like in a city space, right? That's all we really are worried about creating right now. I'm not worried about any specific details or anything like that. This building, let's make this one a little taller. Okay, so that this comes all the way to the top. That's not really what happens in the picture, but that's what we're gonna do. And there's like we're gonna maybe paint like this kind of arch because that's kind of cool, but I think we're gonna leave off most of everything else. There's maybe some like, we're gonna make that we're gonna make the decisions on what there we go. Okay, do you see how this is like so simplified? That's what we want. And actually what's interesting is I think these buildings you just kind of see buildings all the way there. Like, so you're kind of seeing this street come this way, and then it kind of comes, there's like a kind of cool, I don't know. Okay. I know that's not helpful, but I'm just kind of looking at the general shape. So this is what we're going to have. This is just very general, soft, loose sketch. And now what we're going to do is pick out some of our people. So we have somebody here. She's actually walking towards us, but we're not going to do that. We're going to make her shoulders And we're just gonna kind of make like, and then her waist and her legs, which one is kind of tucking behind the other, right? Like that. And then she's got an arm that's coming like this, and this other arm we can't see because it's holding her purse in front of, right? And this is her head. That's where her head is. But what we're gonna do is add an umbrella over here. Just an upside down kind of view. There. Okay, so that's our first person. I think her legs look a little funky, so I'm just gonna kind of come down there. Okay. And then we're going to, there's another girl that's here, and she's got this nice little jacket on, so we're going to do that. I'm just going to look at the shape. So her hair, and it kind of comes on to her coat, and so you kind of don't even see any real, like there's no, like this is where her hair is, right? There's not a lot of differentiation between her top to her bottom, but her waist comes in, and then she's got this like jacket that is like this longer jacket. So we're going to paint that. And then of course her legs are shorter because she's got a jacket, and this leg is kind of kicking out because she's walking, and this leg is down, right? And so again, you see this is like the most simplistic little sketches ever. And she is also going to have an umbrella because everybody's going to have an umbrella. And those umbrellas make it so that you don't see all the way the top of somebody's head, right? Because they're holding up an umbrella. Okay. All right. So we're going to kind of go like this. And then we've got a few people that are farther in the distance here, and so we're gonna kind of like little head, they're farther away, and you can see this guy, he's got kind of a foot that sticks out this way, and here's his arm, and then we've got, and he's standing right next to somebody who is standing here, and she is also got on a longer coat, right? So we're gonna do that, and you just see her feet. Right, and they're kind of close and joined together. So we're gonna let that paint just kind of bleed together. And then, and I think, let's see, do we wanna do one more person? I'm gonna use, okay, so there's somebody who's standing off to this side, but we're actually gonna put them to this side because I'd like to have people walking on both sides of this street. And so there's a guy here, and he's got his shoulders kind of kicked up, and this arm is hanging down, right? And he's got, here's his, and he might have kind of a, let's put a bag in his hand. And here's his legs. And we're just gonna draw his legs down, and he's got his head here, and he is not wearing he does not have an umbrella, right? But maybe this person does, and they're kind of sharing. Okay, up here. Okay, there we go. That's all we're gonna do. And we're going to, if we want to dip in like the illusion of a few other people, we can do that. I'm going to pull out a sketch that's kind of the inspiration for this. Let me grab a book. So go ahead and I'll leave this as a time to screenshot this, and then I'm going to pull out a sketch to show you that is sort of the inspiration for how we're going to handle these people, so you can see ahead of time what we're doing. Okay, let's see if I can find it. I should have done this ahead of time, but I'm just thinking about it now. Sometimes that happens. I start filming and then I go, oh, okay, so here. Do you see how this is like a group of people, and everybody's just kind of walking, and everything's very like grayed out and muted, and there's not a lot of definition, but you can tell that this is a group of people. Well, that's kind of what we're doing here. We're making this group of people walking in this street. And so we might indicate some people up over here. I don't know. We'll have to see how we want to handle this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lighten my lines, because when I do something really loose, I don't want to have too much happening here. I want to let the watercolor really flow in. There we go. I'm just pouncing. Okay, And this, in our reference photo, is pretty warm. Everything's pretty warm. There's some gray over here because there's some shadowing over here. And I like that. So we are going to use some warmer colors for this. So we'll pull our palette. Let me make sure that we're in good frame here. I don't want to paint where you can't see things. So just do a quick check. All right. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to start with not my biggest brush because I want to lay down quite a bit of water, but not too much. And I have a palette that's really dirty here. That's actually going to be super helpful for what we're doing. So I'm going to just kind of mix up. This is probably a mixture of just some blues and greens that I have used. I'm sure there's some sap green mixed in there, some maybe cobalt and ultramarine. And then over here I'm going to do the same thing. This side happens to be warmer. If you don't have those dirty palette colors in your palette, what you can do is add some kind of like yellow ochre or raw sienna, this kind of warm yellowy color, and then we can throw in a little teeny bit of blue in order to, I'm going to throw in a little teeny bit of cobalt blue just to make it so that it's not too bright. All of these colors are going to be really muted. I'm going to use the same, I'm going to use cobalt blue as my muting color because it's very granulating for all of these. And I want it to stay a little warmer. French ultramarine I use often as well, but French ultramarine is a little more, like, I think intense when I paint it out. And this cobalt blue that I have, it's a Daniel Smith cobalt blue, and I think it's just a little less intense, so it mutes out the color without retaining too much blue, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I just have this palette full of warm, let's get a little more blue here, but very, very muted out, kind of dirty watercolors, which is what we want in order to just have this be a very muted out picture. Okay, so we're gonna start. I'm gonna start with this like rainy blue-gray color, and I'm just gonna, and this isn't in the picture, but I'm gonna bring that up in here, and I'm just going to, and I'm gonna bring it down a little here, and I'm gonna bring it down on the top of these people, because we'll do the people on, we'll add the people later. We're gonna establish our background first. And now I'm gonna add in a bit of this warmer color, but kind of in the middle here, where I've got some blue mixed in, and I'm going to bring a bit more blue in this part because this part's shaded, right? Even if I have to dip in, maybe I'll use a bit more of the cobalt blue just to give it this kind of darker area, because it is. And then I'm gonna kind of ease over into a warmer color because this is a bit warmer here. Right there. And if I feel like I've got too much, I can take my number 14 brush, which has, I'm going to make sure it has no pigment on it. So I'm going to rinse it out really well. And I'm just going to come in and pull up some of that color. And that makes sure, and I can use a paper towel to squeeze out. So this is like a big thirsty brush. I got a little darker here than I wanted. And so that lets me pull up some of that color and just keep its softness. Okay. Now let's work on the buildings a bit. We want this all to flow together. Well, the buildings are a little warmer, and so I'm gonna use my bit warmer color just to indicate that we've got some structures here. We're not worried about creating any real definition, and we're blending everything in. This gets a little. I'm gonna add a little bit of raw sienna here because it gets a little bit darker right here. All right, like you can see, I'm being so loose with this. This is what we want. We just are kind of trying to establish, and this is really dark in here. So let's get a little bit of my, there we go. We're gonna make a darker color using the cobalt blue and the raw burnt sienna. And I'm just gonna come down in here, and I've got that kind of, remember I said, oh, I've got that circly thing, and I'm just gonna kind of come up. We're just adding a little interest, a little bit of roof here. Like seriously, just the loosest paint ever. I'm not even really looking at the reference photo. I mean, only kind of. I'm going to add a little blue in here because I see a little bit of that in the actual photo. Okay, there we go. this is incredibly loose. If you want to, we can go in and add a little bit. We've got like some building windows. We can kind of add an indication of that. Now everything is super wet, so it's going to be soft and flowy. I'm going to do that here. Just add just brush in a little bit of this idea that we've got some structures. I know that we had a kind of a roof up here. I'm going to kind of indicate that a little bit more. Yeah, again, I'm just kind of going through there. That's all we're going to do. We're going to keep this super soft, super loose. There's some little white spaces here and there. That just keeps it interesting. If we wanted to, I think, again, I think this has gotten a little heavy in the middle here, so I might go back in with this brush and pull a little bit of that up. Maybe not quite that much, and then I'm just going to go in and just kind of there we go. There. Now we can always pull up where we need to. There. All right. Now we're going to let this not dry all the way. Usually we let things dry all the way. Right now it's super wet, so if I go in right now, I'm going to end up with kind of a mess. Ooh, you know what I see? There's some really cool reflections on this wet surface here and here. So I'm going to kind of indicate that here, that we just have this water that's kind of flowing here. All right. There's just kind of reflections, and the same thing is here. There's a bit of reflection, and there's a bit of reflection here. Okay, there we go. I'm going to let that line be a little harder. Okay, so see how it's still spreading, but it's not spreading a super lot? That's good. We're going to go with a smaller brush. I'm going to go with a size 4. Stop and make adjustments if you need to right now. If you're a little water bloomy, that's okay. If you've got a lot of water blooms, it's because when you're getting your next bit of color, you're pushing too much water into the brush, and that's pushing your paint around. The other thing is, if you are trying to do this on cellulose paper, it is going to be more challenging. This definitely works better on 100% cotton paper. But keep going, play with it, and then you can always move to cotton paper later after you get kind of those color palettes down and some of the brush palettes down. So even if it is not flowing quite as much as you want to, you can always practice again later. I repeat paintings all the time. And I do that because it helps to make sure that I am getting what I want out of my painting. Okay, so one of the things I liked about this is that the people are all very silhouetted. So we are going to you can use a dark gray that's already in your palette if you like. If you have some Payne's gray or some other type of gray, Jane's gray if you're using, I think that's a color in Daniel Smith. Neutral tint is another one that works. So anyway, you can grab a gray, or you can make your gray. I'm going to make my gray using my burnt sienna and cobalt blue, and that's what I've used for the rest of this painting. So by continuing to use those same colors, that's going to help this really stand out. Now I'm going to go a little bit more to the blue side, and I'm going to do that because it's going to contrast well with what I already have out. Now I'm going to start with my first guy right here, and I'm just going to give his umbrella. There we go. And it's okay if you do not I'm going to leave that little bit. I'm not going to close everything off because I don't want to. I want this to be so loose and figurative. So see how we're just dancing that brush around there. Next, in order to create his shadow for walking, I'm going to pull in a bit more of this browny tone that we used in the background, and we're just going to create a little, there we go, a shadow because he's walking. And I might tip just a little bit of this dark gray in there, right? Just tip it in. Okay, there we go. Let's do the next guy. You have to paint these fairly quickly, and you can't overthink them. So same thing, I'm gonna make, I like this how the umbrella is the darkest at the top and then the guy gets a little lighter. So I'm gonna do that again. I'm gonna mix up my colors. Same two colors, that cobalt blue and burnt sienna. And I'm going to come over here and do this girl, okay, and her umbrella. And I'm going to leave some gaps. I'm not going to paint. There's her head. Here's her shoulders, her coat. And I'm just kind of dancing around. She's got an arm that's like this. It's holding something. And this arm is down, okay? And then we've got her legs. This leg kind of comes down because she's walking forward, and this one is kicking back. And you got to just kind of kick it back, right? Because she's taking a step forward. I'm going to just do an indication of her foot. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take this gray-green color, and we're going to create a little shadow behind her. I'm going to dip into this darker color and let it bleed from her feet down. Okay. And actually, there would be an umbrella shadow, right? And same thing for him, because you'd see that. Okay, isn't that fun? This is like just so simple and loose, but you get this idea that you're in the city and it's rainy and there's some, like maybe the sun, there's some golden light in here, so it might be towards the end of a rain where some sun is starting to peek through, but it's still wet and kind of gray. All right, let's do this, our little couple back here. We're gonna just kind of, there we go, barely paint in, and we've got her, and she has a long coat on, and I'm just making these basic shapes, right? And she's gotta have some feet. I don't love his feet, so we're just gonna kind of there, go like that. All right, and now I'm gonna darken this up a little. I just like the idea of their umbrella being slightly darker. I don't know why, I just do. So I'm gonna pull a little bit. My paints are starting to dry here. I need to add a little water. All right, we're gonna pull some of those two colors together again, and let's do their umbrella that they're sharing. And there's this, I wanna just like make this tiniest little like boom. Okay, now for their shadow, I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to go like this, and then let's like make their umbrella. There we go. Okay, now we got this guy that's standing over here. So I'm going to start with the same. We've got his head. Remember, he doesn't have an umbrella, so he is just wet. And he's got like a briefcase here. So we're going to paint that in. Here's his legs. Okay, there we go. And I think he's a little like faded. I need to add just a bit more color to him. Because you can see through, there we go. Okay, and now let's add that shadow. I'm gonna add his two legs like this and then go like that. Okay, there we go. Okay. If you wanted to, you could go back in and do a little more defining. In like here, you've got like this like railing. Because now things are dry, right? There's like a balcony here. And so I can kind of come down and come down like this. There's kind of a doorway here. So I'm going to put that doorway here. It's not really a door because it's very tall. I think it's more like an awning. I don't know. I'm just going to kind of add in some of this stuff. Now, if this is a little darker than I want it, so I'm going to go back in and I'm going to flood it out a little. Like this was just too much. I don't want this much detail, right? So I'm just going to kind of flood so that we have an indication that something's happening here, but we don't really know what it is. I don't want to get caught up in the details. I did like that we had this kind of archy door here, and so I do want to, it was in this building up here, and so we're just going to kind of like, we're going to just bring it here, and then in order to kind of cue this out, I'm just going to kind of flood it out a little bit, okay? There. It's hardly an arch now. And I'm going to make, there are some windows here, and I just want to give an indication of that. There's like 4. And so I'm just painting some very basic 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to go like, oops, setting my hand in wet stuff. And there's kind of like this, there. And I can go back in and soften that up just a bit with my paper towel because I don't want these details to get in the way of what we're trying to show, which is these people are walking on this nice rainy street. Now we've got kind of a steel colored, actually it's not in the picture, but I added it, which is this kind of steely colored, it's off, way off in the distance. And so it's like kind of like this building, right? And we want to give it a little bit of, got a little bit of like here, like it's like there's the street actually curves here, right? And so we're just going to kind of give an indication of that here, right? And I'm going to kind of come up here. I'm just wiggling my brush back and forth, doing a little dry painting. And if I think this is too much, I'm just going to pull some of that out with my paper towel. And then here is like a little there's like a little stand something here. So we're going to do that. Do you see how you could have stopped before? This is, I don't want to say unnecessary, but it is unnecessary, but it's adding a little something. So as soon as I feel like this is no longer adding something and I feel like it's distracting from what we're trying to do, then I really need to stop. This right here, this building that's closest to us has kind of like this rail that these windows are on. So I'm going to just, I'm just pulling from my palette all of these different kind of colors, and I'm trying to keep that perspective going that is here. And I'm just going to kind of define that barely, right? We're going to barely define that there's some windows here, and we're going to come and do the same thing here. And I'm only using our reference photo is just the bare baseline, right? And then this comes here and the rest is kind of dark and you can't really even see what's going on. So I'm going to add a little bit more of both of my colors, a little bit more cobalt blue, a little bit more of the burnt sienna, and I'm going to make sure this is on the darker grayed outside, so it's going to be a bit more blue than burnt sienna. A little bit. I'm just kind of playing with my mixture till I get what I want. There we have it. And this is going to be a little bit there's a tree here. So let's do that. We're going to indicate that here. Just with there we go. And I'm going to add a stump, and then I'm going to add just a bit more burnt sienna, and I'm going to make it look like a pot. There isn't a pot there, but we're just going to kind of indicate that. Okay. And I keep using the word indicate because that's what we're doing. And it's a huge pot, right? It's like a big potted tree. I don't know. We're just messing. There we go. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to leave this alone. This is a very atmospheric-y, watercolory. There would be people up here. So let's take this softest color that we have here, and we're just going to go, we're just going to create a couple people off in the distance, right? They're walking up here because we've got, and maybe they have an umbrella. And I'm going to create a person here with an umbrella, and I'm just doing a little eyebrow shape, a little dot underneath, kind of a little square, and a couple of legs. And they're way off in the distance, so we're using super soft colors. And the farther away they get, the smaller they are, right? So that's why we have just these little kind of people here. And we're just like a dot, a wiggle, and you pull it down. We can do the here. We're going to do a little bigger. So dot, pull down that, back, legs, umbrella. All right. I love it. I think this was a really fun paint, and I think that it is just it's one of the beautiful things about watercolor is that we took two colors. We painted all of this with only two colors, and that was cobalt blue and burnt sienna. And we are so loose about it, but you definitely know what this is, which is that these are people who are in an urban area and they're walking in the rain. And so without adding much definition, without having to do this big fancy sketch, you know what you're looking at, and your brain just fills in the rest. And so that's what I think the beauty of watercolor is, and it's what I'm always striving for. Oftentimes my paintings get more detailed than I intend them to be because I get caught up in the details. And so I think practicing these kinds of paintings that really help for you to like let go of anything that's not important and only tell the story of what's happening with the very basics, the least amount of information. That's one of the things I love about watercolor. All right, well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for our next tutorial. We're getting so close to our 31 days. If you've been with me this whole time, thank you so much. If you're just jumping in now, I'm happy to have you here. When World Watercolor Month ends, I do have some other plans for continuing on. I'm going to do maybe a beginner series, landscape, which will be fun. That's where I really love to paint, is landscapes. And maybe just some like foundational skills. I'd love to talk about some art supplies. We'll see. You can let me know in the comments what you would hope to learn after this World Watercolor Month is over and these challenges are done. All right, thanks so much. Hit the subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.